Breath of the Wild has many waterfalls, and these are great, wonderful things that make the world a little nicer to look at. I want to know how many waterfalls are there, and in order to count them, we need to define what actually counts as a waterfall. You can look on the map and see it's a place where there's a little line in the body of water, but there's another way to define it. When you're wearing the Zora armor and you swim at the bottom of a waterfall, the game prompts you to press A to swim up it. That's how you know the game truly considers it to be a waterfall. First, we should talk about the things that look like waterfalls but aren't waterfalls. In Gerudo Town, there's a whole bunch of tiny waterfalls here around the walls of the town, and you cannot swim up them because you can't even put the Zora armor on to try swimming up them. So I'm not going to count any of those. Near Dueling Peaks at the end of the little river, there's a waterfall going up to that cave with a bunch of treasure chests in it, and you can't swim up it because the water is too shallow and you're not actually swimming at the bottom of the waterfall, so it won't let you swim up it. There are two mini waterfalls in Hateno Village, and they look like you should be able to swim up them, but you can't. Near the base of Hyrule Castle, there's one waterfall that starts as a waterfall at the top, but slows down into just a trickle at the bottom, and you also cannot swim up that. Finally, along the river in the Farron Region, there are two little waterfalls there, and it seems like you really should be able to swim up them, but the game says no, so you can't. Now let's talk about the real waterfalls, starting with Zoras Domain. There are so many there. There's a few of them in the river leading into the area, there's a bunch all surrounding it, and they all work. You can swim up them, they're super useful for getting around. Going from Zoras Domain into the Ukala region, there's also several waterfalls, and they're all really tall, really useful, and really good to look at. I forgot to mention, when two waterfalls are super close together, I'm going to count them as one. So in Zoras Domain, there's a couple places where you go up one waterfall, it takes you a third of the way up the hill, then you walk 10 feet and go up a different one. I'm counting those as one. Next, let's talk about the Lanayru and Nakluda regions. In Kakariko Village behind Impa's house, there's a few tiny waterfalls. You can swim up them, but I'm just counting them as one because they're so little and close together. In the Lanayru Promenade, there's a waterfall with a shrine behind it. The east end of Lake Ciela has a little waterfall, and also Nervada Lake near Hateno Village has a very nice waterfall. And the stable next to Dueling Peaks, the shrine next to that, is in a pond, and that pond has a waterfall going near the top of Dueling Peaks. In the Hebra region, there are 3 waterfalls around the Hebra Plunge and the Hebra Head Spring, and they are very cold. It is really painful to swim up these waterfalls, but you can do it. Hyrule Castle has multiple distinct waterfalls you can swim up. I counted 6 of them. And they're hard to swim up because the current is so fast that if you don't get right to the bottom, it pushes you away. Near the Great Plateau, there's 4 waterfalls. There's one from the river that goes into Lake Hylia. There's one that goes into the River of the Dead. Then at the other end of the River of the Dead, there's one that drops off the Great Plateau entirely into this big body of water that doesn't have a name, where the Dig Dog suspension bridge goes through. There's also a second waterfall going into that big lake. And finally, the place with the most water that is falling is Lake Floria in the Farron region. I counted like 9 distinct waterfalls, all flowing into this one lake. It's a pretty cool place to be. I forgot to mention completely, there are a bunch of little waterfalls around the edge of the Zoras Domain structure itself that take you up to it. I'm only counting that as one because there's so many of them and they all do the same thing. And here is the final map. You can see there are 42 green dots corresponding to waterfalls that you can swim up. And there's a few red ones of the waterfalls you couldn't, and the map doesn't go far enough to show Gerudo, that would just be a bunch of red. So that's my answer. I'm counting 42 distinct waterfalls. Pretty cool.